Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mix Zone, the first edition of our podcast on Around the Rings, a weekly review of the ups and downs in the world of Olympic sport. I'm Ed Hula.
And I'm Gerard Farek. Glad you're here.
And we'll be reviewing some of the events of the week, events coming up, and other things happening in the world of the Olympics. And we're glad you joined us for this review on the Mix Zone. First thing, as the Tokyo Olympics fade away, the big thing for the IOC and the Olympic movement is just months away. The Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics. We had some doubts about whether there would be Tokyo Olympics, and I guess folks have been wondering whether the same kind of threat hangs over the Beijing Olympics. But Gerard, it seems to be that Beijing 2022 is coming. The Winter Olympics will be here next February, but they will be different.
Yeah, I think it's going to be even stricter, the guidelines. I mean, based on how the Chinese government is handling the COVID-19 pandemic at the moment, they are much more strict in their protocols. And I think you will see that reflected here, I guess, next month when the first playbooks come out from the IOC about for the stakeholders. I'm thinking compared to Tokyo, Beijing will be a much more strict setup. And I would think it's not a surprise already that, yes, we're going to have a flame lighting coming up next month, but we've heard nothing about a torch relay. And I'm wondering, the torch relay in Japan was, of course, much smaller than it used to be, with a lot fewer areas that had spectators that were allowed. And you got to wonder, one, are they going to have a torch relay at all? And two, if they do have a torch relay, will it be, I can't believe there will be any spectators. And I'm wondering if they're going to even have one at all. What do you think?
Well, I would think that the time has passed for them to organize a major event like a torch relay across a country as big and as populous as China. As you say, we've heard nothing about it. In comparison to the news release that we got today from Paris 2024, talking about the first steps they were taking towards organizing the torch relay for 2024. We have heard nothing along those lines from Beijing, and with the games 5 months away, and the torch relay, which would start in just a few months, nothing in the way of organizing. And I think in terms of maintaining safety, maintaining the health of China and athletes, that there probably won't be such a display with the relay. I think maybe they might drop the torch into provincial areas, major cities, that sort of thing. But I don't think it's going to be the day-to-day grind of the torch relay that we'll be dealing with in Beijing. And the question of foreign spectators goes the same way. I think Beijing is not very eager to have a lot of people come to the country, have to deal with where people go. The question of quarantines becomes much simpler if everybody stays home. And right now, from the United States, you can't get there from here. Flights are difficult to obtain. They're expensive, and I don't think Beijing is letting anybody from overseas in right now. on a casual basis. So tens of thousands of foreign tourists coming to cheer on the teams in Beijing. I don't think it'll happen.
Well, that seems to blunt maybe some of the ideas, specifically the idea of Mitt Romney, who had raised it like a possibility of an economic boycott for the Beijing Olympics because of the issues tied with the human rights violations, et cetera, in the region with the Uyghurs. The IOC doesn't even use the name, doesn't talk about it much, but the idea that Romney had thrown out here a few months back was, we will not send our, fans over there. We don't want them spending money over in China. And well, now that seems to be a moot point. So is there going to be like a diplomatic boycott? That's the other thing that's been talked about, right?
Yeah, that would seem to be the last option open for anybody to launch a protest or some other display of unhappiness with Beijing policies. But I'm not sure how much attention it would get. We have heard this week that Vladimir Putin has accepted an invitation from Chinese Premier Xi Jinping to come to the Olympic Games, but we haven't heard much about any other heads of state lining up to go to Beijing next February. Just as a passing thought here, Jacques Rogge, who died last month at the end of August, I remember talking to him in 2013, soon after China was awarded, or rather, Tokyo was awarded the 2020 Olympics in 2013 at the end of his presidency, and he talked about the rise of Asia in the Olympics, and that the Pyeongchang Olympics in 2018, followed by Tokyo in 2020, really showed how Asia was on the increase as far as the Olympic movement goes. And that was followed, of course, soon after by Beijing being awarded the Winter Olympic Games. But I think there's a fatigue kind of setting in here that people will be very glad to relieve themselves of when the Beijing Olympics passes in 2022. I don't think there's much of an appetite to return to Asia for the Olympics anytime soon, but Sapporo, Japan, certainly in the hunt for the 2030 Winter Olympic Games, and I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah, you look at what's happened since. I mean, there are obviously many reasons for it, Agenda 2020 and how changing how the whole bidding process works. But coming up after Beijing, you've got Paris, you've got Milano Cortina, you've got Los Angeles, and then you've got Brisbane, Australia. So those are all Western countries, right?
Yeah.
Australia, obviously part of the West in the political sense. And so you've got 2030, and like you said, that's the only one that's really open right now. And Sapporo is in the bidding for that, but you can't really consider them a favorite at all if they're going to be going up against Salt Lake City or Vancouver. And the other ones, you've got the Barcelona, Spanish, Pyrenees,
whatever they figure that,
whatever comes of that. But yeah, so I think there's been it's an interesting switch, because you've had, you would have had 3 straight Asian ones, and now all of a sudden you're flipping back the other way, and there's no like, well, let's go to this region one time, and then maybe next time we'll go to another region. It's I don't know if there's any planning to that, but I agree with you. I think it shows they've had enough and they want to try something different, I think.
The UN General Assembly meeting this week in New York. It's often a kind of a big deal for the IOC, but this year, not so much. Often the IOC president has been at the UN General Assembly this week in New York, meeting one-on-one with heads of state and other representatives of countries at the UN. But Thomas Bach is in Europe and will not be traveling to the UN this week. Very low-key presence at the General Assembly.
Yeah, you would think they have observer status there, and you would think maybe it would be noteworthy enough that they would have, that Bach would travel. He has shown he's not against travel during the pandemic, so I don't believe that is part of it. But I guess also it is true that there are quite a few people who are attending this maybe virtually, so they figure they can be one of those.
And we do have at least one IOC member who spoke. I believe Sheikh Tamim, the Emir of Qatar, is still an IOC member, and I think he spoke yesterday at the meeting. But that's about the only high-level IOC presence in the General Assembly. We would mention that Alberto Moreno, who is the IOC member in Colombia, is the IOC's special representative for the United Nations, and he is in New York representing the IOC's interests and keeping an eye on things. Moreno came to the IOC, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, and he's been very active in international finance and banking, and has a very good background dealing with NGOs and organizations like the UN. So while it's a low-key presence at the UN, the IOC is still represented and has an observer there following things. A few other things happening this week. Ice Hockey Federation getting ready to elect a new president.
Yeah, that's right. It's hard to believe. Renee Fassel has been there for, well, forever, it seems like.
1994.
Yes. Wow. But they've got a few things to iron out, but one of the big things that for them is that the NHL players, the National Hockey League players, the best players in the world, have agreed to go to the Beijing Olympics. So that is something that they've been working on for, it seems like forever, but it certainly months, if not years, trying to get this squared away after the NHL players decided, or well, they didn't decide. The players wanted to go to Pyeongchang, but the league couldn't agree with the IOC and to bring them there for Pyeongchang. So the players made it a point in the last collective bargaining agreement that part of the deal is that we get to go back to the Olympics. So that has happened, and I think that for the Ice Hockey Federation is a big deal.
And we do want to mention there are 5 candidates running for president. They include Henrik Bach Nielsen of Denmark, Peter Britsa from the Czech Republic, Sergei Goncharov from Belarus, Franz Reindl, the German Hockey Federation president, and Luc Tardif of France, the 5th candidate. The executive committee of the IIHF will meet in St. Petersburg, Russia this weekend, and they will select the successor to
Renee, yeah,
Renee Fossell. Having a senior moment here.
it's okay.
I
It's
guess
okay.
it's allowed once or twice.
So speaking of elections, we had a couple of them this week. One of them tied Spiros Kapralos, winning a fourth term. He says his last term as Greek NOC president. Greece is going to be busy next month. The IOC coming for more than a few days. Looks like.
Executive board meeting is coming up in October. That 1 or 2 day meeting in Athens will be the first time that they've met, I believe, in Greece in this way since the 2004 Olympics in Athens. So it's been some time since they've gone to Greece, and they'll have the executive board meeting, followed by a trip to Olympia. They'll I don't know how they'll get there, but it's a hike if you go by car, a very, very fast car, and don't pay attention to the speed limits. Takes you about 4 hours to drive from Athens to Olympia in the Peloponnese. Otherwise, some sort of air transport would be needed to get them back and forth for the flame lighting, as well as the inauguration, the grand opening of renovations for the Olympic Academy in Olympia. It's a beautiful campus, but it is obviously not a lot been done with it in the 60 or 70 years that it's been located there in Olympia, and needed work from the ground up. Water system, the sewage system, accommodations, restaurants, everything is supposed to be renewed and in good shape for the academy to continue with its program of classes and meetings. And we also would note that the crowds are going to be very limited in Olympia for the lighting of the Olympic flame for Beijing, much like it was handled last year. They did have a very, very limited participation in torch lighting, the flame lighting for the Tokyo Olympics, and then the flame, of course, got put into a holding pattern in Japan after it was lit. But there were a few spectators there, and I think it's going to be the same thing with the torch lighting next month in Olympia as well. But traditionally, the Winter Olympic torch lighting has been a pretty low-key affair without many people there.
So let's wrap this up. As you know, we were planning to go only so long, and of course we've gone longer, but you know, that always happens. But I wanted to mention a couple of things on the Paralympics front. Andrew Parsons has been nominated as the sole candidate for a second term as the International Paralympic Committee president. And also today, we found out that wheelchair basketball has been provisionally put back into the program for Paris 2024. So that was another one of these long-term problems that the IPC was trying to work out with wheelchair basketball, in terms of making sure everything was within the rules as to how the sport is run and who is eligible and those sorts of things. And it's good news that now this has been resolved and wheelchair basketball is back, or will be, in Paris.
And one other note of congratulations before we go away. Ur Erdner, re-elected president of the International Archery Federation, World Archery. He's been president of the organization since I think 2006, middle part of that decade there. He, of course, is IOC member in Turkey, head of the Medical and Scientific Commission of the IOC, and one of the real gentlemen of the Olympic movement. It's a pleasure to know him and work with him. And it sounds like he'll be serving a final term as president of World Archery, and other people, younger people, will be stepping forward to take the reins of that federation eventually there. So I guess that does it for us this week.
Sure. There's always so much to talk about, but we got to stop at some point, right? We'll save the rest for next week, right?
And we'll have plenty more to talk about then when we come back with the next edition of The Mix Zone with me, Ed Hula.
And me, Gerard Farek. Until then, so long.